Hey, everybody, it's Mark, and I'm back with another great episode of Finding Your Summit, all about people overcoming adversity and finding their way. Okay, before we get on with the pod today with Gus Frerotte, I've got a great quote, which I think this applies to you. A dream doesn't become reality through magic. It takes sweat, determination, and hard work. That was by the one and only Colin Powell. And so I think this really applies to you, Gus, in terms of we had a very similar path, and we're going to find out more about that. But first of all, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for having me on. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, so it wasn't too long ago that you and I got caught up, and now you have a podcast, Post Your Football Life, and we're going to get into that. You actually had a long football life called Huddle Up with Gus. So let's start there, which I normally start the other way, but let's start there, and then we're going to backpedal a little bit. So where was this idea to come up with this podcast?
So my co-host and good friend of mine, Dave Hager, which you met, we are both huge Pirate fans, and we've been struggling to be a Pirate fan for the last quite a few years. And, you know, our local radio stations just love to harp on all the bad things. And, you know, we had Antonio Brown going on, we had Le'Veon Bell, we had all the Pirate drama, and it just was just too much. And we started not liking and didn't want to really listen to that. And we said, let's do something different, because we felt like there were no stories being told, you know, on a sports radio. It was just, hey, blast out the most recent noise, and that was it. And there's no stories about people's lives or high school. And so I felt like we were missing something. And I said, do you want to do this with me? And Dave said, yeah, I'd love to. Dave is a big sports nut and has a high acumen for all the stats and analytics. And I'm not like that. He can remember stuff from the 70s that I could never remember. And so we just kind of went in together, and we started finding some traction with people. We found a local media company that wanted to help us, and called Tribune Review. And they helped us for a little bit, but then we moved on from them, and now we're with radio.com. And we're really excited because we've been building this thing over the last 9 months, and hopefully we get it to where we get a bunch of listeners that want to hear the stories of all the people that we bring on, like when we brought you on and talking about the 7 summits.
Yeah, no, that was a lot of fun. And when you start making a reference about nobody was really paying any attention to the Pirates or being a Pirate, I assume this is like the Pittsburgh Pirates, not actually
Right.
being a pirate out in the ocean and attacking ships.
Well, the Pirates might as well be out in the ocean the way they played this year.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. All right, so let's get back into so you're a Pittsburgh guy. You grew up in the great state of Pennsylvania, and you know, you're like a lot of guys, like a lot of young kids, is out there. You're playing all these different sports, and you turn out to have a 15-year NFL team. And I didn't go quite that long. A bunch of different teams, 7 different teams. I was on 3. But let's go back in the days of your recruitment and coming out of high school. And what was that like for you growing up?
Well, I would say my childhood was different from most. I fought through a lot of adversity. In 9th grade, I broke my neck playing football, and I didn't play for my 9th or 10th grade year. Never played quarterback till I was a junior in high school. And then we ran the wing T, so we never really threw it. I just was lucky enough to be 6'4" and 210 pounds, and went to a camp called the Joe Butler Metro Index Camp, which allowed me to show off arm strength, even though I didn't have a lot of kind of fundamentals to go with that. I just had, I was big, I was strong, I could throw the ball a long way. And so that brought some colleges into my radar. And then my senior year, had a pretty good senior year. I was at a small school. I tell kids all the time, look, my high school, our senior team, we had 19 kids on our team, not 19 athletes, 19 kids.
And isn't that like, what do they call it? B9 football, or, where they only have, or B8, where they only have.
No. It wasn't 8-man football. No,
yeah,
it was,
yeah.
No, it was regular football, but we didn't have a lot of kids playing. And, I never left the field, which I can remember. And I wish I could be in that shape again, but just never left the field, played offense, defense, every special teams, and never got a break in the whole game time, which I absolutely loved. And I enjoyed it. And I tell kids all the time, look, you may want to go to this big high school or go and think that if I go there, I'm going to get recruited. I said, look, if you have the heart, if you have the determination, and you have the talent, they're going to find you no matter where you are. And that's kind of what happened with me. I thought I was going to go be a baseball player.
So what was the decision process, though, when you break your neck, right, and you go on to have this great career in the NFL? But there's a lot of people that probably, including your doctors and maybe your parents, maybe your mother, maybe your girlfriend, if you had one at the time, that were like, listen, Gus, the risk versus the reward, and like all these things, and kind of going back to the quote that I just read by Colin Powell. You got to where you got to because of the hard work. Yeah, you're given some gifts and you end up being 6'4" and 225, but that's not magic, right? As Colin said, that's hard work and that's determination. But there's also the reality of the situation of not knowing that you're going to have this 15-year career and the consequences of having something much more severe, paralysis, perhaps, that could happen to you.
Well, yeah, and going through that, my mother obviously didn't want me to play. The coach, we got a new coach at my high school, who's actually my father-in-law now, Harry Beckwith. And,
Wow.
he took it slow with me and he said, hey, I was over there one day and he said, hey, come help us build the bleachers. When you're in a small school, you're doing everything you can. We were rebuilding the bleachers. We were painting them. We did whatever we could. And I was a part of that process. My dad was a mill guy. And I've seen him go through stuff. So I'm like, okay, if he can do it, I can do it. I've seen him take a chainsaw through his forearm and finish work before he went to the hospital.
Wow.
So, you just kind of grow up in that mindset and you heal. When you're young, you heal. And I just started playing again and end up, I didn't think I was ever going to play defense again, but I ended up playing defense again and then end up getting a scholarship and going to college. And it just happened so fast. And I look back at it and say, man, I couldn't imagine what I would have had, what choices I would have had if I would have had the internet. So I didn't really know anything about Tulsa. I knew that the head coach, Dave Hager, came to my house twice from Oklahoma, and he really liked me.
Yeah.
And that was basically why I made the choice to go to Tulsa.
And did you have a lot of choices?
Well, I had Howard Schnellenberger recruited me he was at Louisville.
Okay.
Kansas State recruited me, and that was like 3 planes, so I wasn't going there.
Yeah.
Temple recruited me. There was a 10-foot fence around Temple, so I wasn't going there from the country. And and it was kind of between Tulsa and Louisville. I really wanted to go to Michigan because I got a bunch of letters from them early, and then, albeit when I got drafted by the Redskins, Cam Cameron was my quarterback coach, and he was actually at Michigan at the time they were recruiting me. And I said, what happened, Cam? Why did you stop recruiting me? He said, well, it was we were recruiting 3 quarterbacks and we got the first one. He committed to us. And so we stopped recruiting the next 2 because we can't afford scholarships for all of you. And I said, I understand now. But, when you're a kid in high school and you're seeing Michigan and it's up there with the Notre Dames and everybody else. And you're saying, man, that would just be amazing to go there. And then all of a sudden you don't get any more letters or any more phone calls. And so you just move on. And I was just excited to, be recruited by these Division I schools. I was recruited by smaller baseball schools. And in my mind, I said, okay, I'm going to have a way better opportunity and get a full ride and go to college, if I take one of these Division I scholarships, where most of the baseball ones were Division II and smaller schools.
I've had another former Tulsa football player on this podcast, Hall of Famer. You might know who he is, Mr.
Maybe
Steve Largent. Steve Largent, great guy, yeah, and obviously longtime Seattle Seahawk. Fantastic guy, great story. And I've never been, actually, even I played against Oklahoma back in the day in the Orange Bowl, but I've actually never been to the great state of Oklahoma. And so certainly I've never been to Tulsa. But what was that experience like for you? And I'm talking about scholastically, and I'm also talking about, from a football, because like you said, it's not the tier 1 Super 5 conference that we have today as we know them. And Notre Dame is not in the Super 5, but obviously they're a big Power 5 school. But what was that like for you in terms of competing, playing, getting opportunities, and where that went and ultimately led for you to get an opportunity to go in the NFL?
Yeah, I love the competition. I just loved sports at that point, and going there and being able to do that every single day. Now, when I look back at a lot of things. Of course, I would change some things about the way I went about college, but it is what it is, and it got me to where I need to be. But college was great. I got to compete every day with guys from all over the country, and you wanted to go prove that, hey, they're going to bring in 10 quarterbacks, and I'm going to be the best one out here. We had a quarterback by the name of TJ Rubley, who was older than me. He got hurt in a game against Arkansas, and my second year, I was redshirted. Then my second year in college, I was not supposed to play. I was punting, and I ended up starting, 8 games that year. And TJ got a medical redshirt, came back his senior year. I just punted my third year in college, and then played my last 2 years out in football. So it was always competing, always wanted to be really, really good. And just, it was a place where we threw the ball. I went from high school where I threw probably 45, 50 times my whole high school career to throwing it 45, 50 times in college.
Wow.
And then I look back at, like, if I could go back, I would definitely go back to business school and change that. I went through the health phys ed recreation program because, here I am from the country. I thought, hey, what could I do to stay in the woods, stay in the, what I love to do outdoors all the time. And that was that health phys ed recreation program where I could go on to be, you might want to be a ranger. You could be all kind of different things. And so I just really didn't know, but that gave me an opportunity to get good grades and then also graduate, which was important.
So when you took over the starting quarterback as a sophomore, and then the TJ came back as his senior year, did he not displace you, become the starting quarterback again, or did he just not beat you out at that point?
No, he did. Yeah, he just kind of got his job back naturally.
Yeah.
I played pretty well, not well enough to beat him out, and he came back, had a good year. We ended up going to the Freedom Bowl that year.
Yeah.
They still talk about when we beat Texas A&M. That year, and so that was big. And I was punting, and albeit when we played Texas A&M, I had a 1-yard punt. That's what I remember from the game. Even though it was super exciting and the fans were going crazy, I'm like, I had a 1-yard punt against Texas A&M. Went off the side of my foot, went out of bounds. But then coming back the next few years, just had some incredible years, and played with some guys that made the NFL, and just was a really good team. And I just love Coach Rader. We spent a lot of time, maybe it wasn't legal, but, they have all these rules now where you only get so many hours. And he would text me, or not text me, he'd call me, or we had a plan that we'd meet at 8:30 at the field house, and he'd bring Arby's, and I'd watch film for 2 hours with him. He played college football at Tulsa, and then went on and played for the Giants for a few years.
So is there a single thing, and we're going to move on to the NFL here in a minute, but is there a single thing that you look back on now? We're both long time retired. The game is way in the rearview mirror. And you look back and, maybe it was back in Pennsylvania, growing up outside of Pittsburgh, and every day you got up and you had a tire swinging by a tree and you throw at it or something. I mean, is there something that you can tie back to some of your success that wasn't necessarily obvious?
It goes off what your show is about, adversity.
Yeah.
Adversity never bothered me. I faced it in all types of ways, whether it was in baseball, football, basketball, getting injured or losing a game. You face adversity in all types of, whether it was my dad was my toughest critic, and we've had many battles. I mean, I'd throw 4 touchdowns and 3 interceptions, and he'd say, why the hell would you throw that ball to that guy? And I'm like, well, you weren't out there, Dad. How do you know?
Right.
And so things like that. And I think that just playing through all of that, Tulsa, we didn't win a whole heck of a lot of games, and you just had to fight. You had to fight through adversity. It'd be tough. You had to take hits and get up off the ground and prove to your teammates that, hey, just because I got hit doesn't mean I'm going to lay here and be soft. And so, being from Western Pennsylvania, one of the things is you got to be tough. And that's kind of what my mantra was going through my early and mid football career.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously it reflects on the success that you ultimately had, because, at the end of the day, you want to have one step higher than your last step, getting back up on top of that horse. For me, I grew up in Seattle, Washington, and something that, again, wasn't so obvious, but there was a beach club down on Lake Washington, and I'd go down there, every day during the summer. and they had a log that you could get out there and roll. And so I'd be one of those guys that you'd see those, lumberjacks, that would be out there rolling. And I'd be out, the goal was to get dry, and I'd be dry, half the day. And so it taught me about tremendous amount of footwork, foot speed. And as you know, getting up the line of scrimmage is everything for a receiver. And the other part of that was balance. And, when you're flying through the air and coming down and catching balls and you're awkward, to keep your feet and your frame underneath you. So those are those little things for me that ultimately I think would really help me.
Yeah. And as you mentioned that, I think back to my dad, really, when I was a kid, everything was throw the ball hard. There was not throw it to where you're absolutely accurate with everything. When I pitched, it was throw it hard, throw the first one at their head, throw the next one over the plate. Throw the football as hard as you can, like get your arm strong. And I was wild. I mean, that ball flew everywhere when I was a kid, but I still believe that's why I had a strong arm, was because, man, he just would not, if I threw a lob ball to him, he just was not happy. He just would say hey, you got to strengthen your arm, and the only way to do that is by throwing the ball super hard. And then I kind of went through my whole career like that.
So let's jump over there for a minute. So with your dad then, was it a contentious relationship, or is it's always been healthy, but he just drove you really hard? What was that like?
No, there were some contentious times, in 8th grade when I was playing football. I came home after the first practice and I said, Dad, my foot's killing me. And my mom says, I think he broke his foot. And my dad said, no, I just bought him those new cleats. He's playing, just tie your shoe tighter. Played the whole season. After the season, foot's still hurting. Go to the doctor. And the doctor said, how long has it been like this? I said, since the first day of practice. He said, well, you've been playing on a broken foot for, 9 weeks. And how did you do that? And I knew that I had to go through it. And that's what it was. My dad was a tough guy. He's one of 15 kids and was in the military, and just, you didn't mess with him. And, whatever he said went. It was not like he was kind of violent in any way. He was just tough. He was just he was youngest boy of 15 kids. He had 2 younger sisters, and everything came down on him. And so he only knew one way to raise me was to be tough on me.
Yeah, I think times have changed, and my dad grew up, he was born in like 1932 or something. He's since passed, but, great guy, but it's just in terms of like emotional support, right? And whenever we talked and we approached each other and I hadn't seen him in a while, it was always a handshake. There was never a hug. And just, the way that they communicated, and it's what they learned and what they learned and what they learned. And so I have 2 girls. And the thing that's been important for me is really my dad was awesome, but at the same time, I want to change that behavior so I didn't end up where I was giving my girls a handshake. They deserve a hug, right?
Exactly. My dad never told me he loved me. Right?
Yeah, same deal. Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's just like, it just didn't happen until he was super sick, and he's older, I'm older, and I don't care what he thinks now, I'm going to say it.
Yeah.
Right? And I don't go a day without telling my wife or my kids, if I get to talk to them and they're not busy, that I love them. Yeah. And that was a big, like you said, that was the kind of the pattern that I wanted to change, because it almost felt like it was taboo to say that.
Yeah.
And I don't feel that way. I feel like you have to express it and show it and tell it.
Well, the thing about that too, Gus, I didn't figure this out. I'm a little bit older than you are, and I didn't figure this out till I was 50. And that is that I'm looking at you. We're facing each other right now on a video. I'm sitting here in Sun Valley, Idaho, and you're somewhere over on the East Coast, somewhere outside of Pittsburgh, right? And you're a big, strong, masculine dude, and it actually shows more strength on when you can open up and be much more open about your feelings and how you care about different people, and I think it gives you more power. And it took me so long to figure that out, and because we were growing up, both of us, in a culture of a bunch of tough guys and running around with a pack of wolves, and you didn't do that, and then we didn't get that kind of mentorship from our parents, because they didn't understand that and they didn't get that. And then, like, you take your situation where your dad is just fighting his way through because he's the low man on the totem pole out of 15 kids. I mean, I can't imagine who has 15 kids, right?
Right.
So
your old Catholic Frerotte family, that's who.
Yeah. No, listen, we're Catholic too. So I get all that. Okay. So however that played, you persevere, you keep going, you make it through Tulsa. You don't win a whole lot, but you keep throwing the ball as hard as you possibly can, and it catches the attention of certain scouts. And so it's interesting because you and I both speak the same language, but you just don't show up and like, hey, I'm going to try out for this NFL team. There's a process, and there's every once in a while an exception to the rule for some freak athlete or something. But what normally happens is that the guys in the country that have stood out and have been recognized by the scouts of these different NFL teams, they then get invited. Usually, it's around 330 kids around the country get invited to go to this thing called the combines, right? So,
Right.
did you get an invite to the combines? Assume you did.
Well, I didn't have a typical path. Let me just put it that
Yeah,
way.
great.
After my senior football season, I came back to Pittsburgh and I lived with my now wife, girlfriend then, Ann. She was going to the University of Pittsburgh. She was a nursing student, and I actually interned for the Pittsburgh Pirates the second semester of my senior year, and lived back here in Pittsburgh. And we lived up in Oakland and Shady's by the University of Pittsburgh. And so most people have pro days, right?
Yeah.
Where you go and you're going back to your college, you're going to have a workout, throw to your receivers. I did get invited to the combine. I got a call from my agent who was, his name is Ralph Sindrich. He was here in Pittsburgh. And he said, look, I wasn't going to be the top guy. They said, they want you to come to the combine to throw every day. And I'm like, sure, whatever I got to do. I'll go for 5 days and throw every day. I threw to the backs, the tight ends, the receivers, the
everybody.
DBs. And every day I would go out before to warm up, and then I would end my warm up by just kind of dropping back 7 steps or whatever and launching it as far as I could. And I'm throwing 65-yard bombs down the field. But that's to get warmed up before everybody's ready. But every coach and owner is sitting in the stadium. So I wanted to do everything I could to show off my arm strength, right? Because I was basically at the combine to service every other player, not to show off my talents, but to service all the other players. And so then after the combine, and I get noticed by some coaches, I wasn't at Tulsa. I was in Pittsburgh. And so I was actually throwing to the coaches in Three River Stadium where the Pirates play. Or we would go over to where the Steelers practiced, and I would just have this guy that I worked with for the Pirates, and he was my receiver, no idea how to run routes or, show anything. And it's just me, this kid who's never played football, but is good enough athlete to pretend, and 2 coaches. So I had it was just amazing experience. I had this individual attention from these coaches that came and worked me out. And it probably wasn't the right way to do it, but it was what I had to do to show off my talents. And I ended up getting drafted by the Redskins in the 7th round.
That's incredible. My path being at the University of Washington, a little bit more high profile school. We were going to the Rose Bowls in those days. We had very good teams. We were always in the top 10, and very fortunate to get invited to the combines. And that year for me was the year of the receiver of all things. And Jerry Rice happened to be in that draft. So he and I went through the combines together. So he had a little bit better career than I did. But nonetheless, it was fun back in those days. So you end up playing 15 years. You end up playing for 7 teams. You end up getting drafted by Washington Redskins. What was that like? Because, there are some teams that are more high profile than others. For me, I went from Seattle down to LA. That's where the Raiders were in those days, and it was amazing, of all places to be. But Washington, D.C. seems pretty cool. It's the capital, obviously, of our nation, and it's just got a great vibe there.
Well, it's just a great NFC East team. And back when I was drafted, there's the fans, there's a 10,000 person waiting list to get tickets. It's not the Washington Redskins that you know today. And it was just such a big thing. I didn't care. I was going to go there. I was going to do everything I could. I didn't want to leave. And at any time, I practiced every day, if longer than I was supposed to. And I'm drafted in 7th round. They took a 1st rounder and Heath Schuler as quarterback. And so, I'm thinking, hey, I just want to make the team.
Yeah.
I had to compete against Pat O'Hara and John Freeze and to really try to solidify a spot on this team.
Yeah.
So Cam Cameron took a liking to me. We went out and worked every day, learned how to throw comebacks, digs, corner routes, 7s, we posts, doing all those things that we didn't do in college, learning really how to be under center a little more, run the power game. And I'll never forget, we were playing Green Bay in the preseason, and Cam goes to me before the game. He goes, "Boy, you don't have any cuts on your chin." I said, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Oh, you'll find out someday." So we're in preseason. They're bringing the Sam and the Mike backer, and it's a hot read, right? The guard's got to, if the Mike comes, he takes him. If he doesn't, then he's going to pop and get the Sam. And if they both come, I got to throw hot to the tight end. Well, yeah. I'm trying to throw a bang 8 down the left side to I can't remember who the receiver was. And boom, sure enough, the Sam hits me right into the chin. My chin's bleeding. And Sam, and after the game goes, Cam goes, "That's exactly what I'm talking about. Now you're a quarterback. Now you know how you're going to pick up the blitz and why you should really be alert for everything coming." So through that little bit of adversity, I learned that, hey, you got to keep your head on the swivel, and it's so important to study.
Yeah, well, especially because everything, to the non-football that has no idea what Gus has said, basically just said that there was this rush coming, and there weren't enough people to actually block, and so he got his ass hit right underneath the chin. And at the same time, you're supposed to get rid of the ball quickly to one of the tight ends or the receivers that are turning around very quickly after maybe 3 steps at most. But, you do go on to 7 teams, and I think what a lot of people don't realize, that we're talking about it now and it seems cool, and people, the average layman, when they open up the newspaper and they look in the transaction and it says, "Hey, look, Gus got traded to Chicago or some other place," you name your team. But what they don't really understand is the impact that you forge these relationships with your teammates. You have an apartment, you're paying bills, maybe you have your car there, maybe there's a girlfriend and wife. I mean, there's all these dynamics that play into it. And so when you end up actually going to another team, it can be tough. It can be a tough transition because now it's a new system, new head coach, new players. You don't even know the town, this new city that you have to find this new life in. And it can be challenging. So how was that for you, having to do that 6 or 7 times?
I'll just give you a quick story. So we had all 3 of our kids. My wife and I were married after my first year in the NFL, and we had all 3 of our kids in Washington. I get cut by the Redskins after 5 years there, and waiting to be picked up by somebody. I end up going to Detroit. And while I was at Washington, I'm also the talk of the town. I've been in the Washington Post all the time, and as you're the quarterback of the Redskins, you're almost in the paper as much as the president, right? And so you start getting all these things. We had a big house, we had a really good life, and we had a lot of friends that we made that were not in football. And as you know, DC is a great place, it's very transient. A lot of people come and go, and we loved it. And so I get picked up by Detroit. I go up to Detroit, and we got to find a place to stay. And I said, "Honey, you got to come up, bring the kids, and we're going to look at these rental homes and let you pick one where you want to stay." And so she comes up, and I'm going to the airport to pick them up. And I pull around, they're there. She is profusely crying, bawling. And I'm like, "Oh my God, what happened? Did something happen on the plane? Are the kids okay?" She goes, "No." She goes, "Why'd you bring me here?" And I said, "What do you mean? What's going on?" She goes, "I just saw the biggest rat run right over our luggage." Like, "You gotta be kidding me." She goes, "We're leaving DC for Detroit." And the first thing she sees at Detroit waiting for me on the curb is a giant rat that looks like, the size of a dog.
Yeah.
But we actually had a great time in Detroit. We had a great team. We made a lot of friends there. And, it was kind of being in the military. If you're a military kid, you move all over. We moved all over. My goal, even though we moved all over, my wife was the best at supporting me and just saying, "Hey, I got the kids. Let's go. Let's take the next adventure." And that's kind of how we looked at it. And a good friend of mine who's still playing, Ryan Fitzpatrick, they've been doing the same thing. 7 teams, they're on 8 teams, and it's just like you just keep going. You take your family with you, and you just create new relationships and new adventures. And the one thing I regret over all of it is I wish I would have just somehow, some way written down more people's numbers, because there's so many people that I got to meet that I don't remember. And I just wish I would have somehow solidified that a little bit better.
Yeah. There's a guy who I had on, I played with the Raiders. He was an all-pro, won a Super Bowl, played for the Eagles and was traded to the Raiders, Jerry Robinson. And I had Jerry on last year, and I said, "Jerry, how are you doing?" And Jerry says, every day I wake up with an attitude of gratitude. And that's kind of what you're saying. You had such an attitude of gratitude. Actually, you're really saying it not only about yourself, but about your wife, who sounds amazing. And to have that life partner with you that's there to support you and everything that you're doing, she's understanding the bigger picture, and really to turn that around. And rather than the poor me, I've got to move again and move the furniture and the kids and schools and all the things that go along with that, it's really like, what a great adventure. Why not? We can always go back to where we're from. That's easy. But to keep going and see how long this whole thing can play out. And it played out for quite a long time for you.
It really did, and Annie was great. She was just the strength of our family, and she kept everything together. We've raised three amazing kids who are all in college now, and none of it would have been possible without her, or my career wouldn't have been possible without her. I'm not saying there weren't tough times. I'm not saying that it's not easy when I have to go to a new team and take 3 months in the off season and train, and she's by herself with three kids. She did that a lot, and to let me try to live out my dream. And being married is not easy. We've been through therapy. We've done a lot of things just so that we can stay together and be on the same page for the rest of our lives.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I was not fortunate enough to withstand that, and I'm now divorced, but it's just sometimes things just don't work for whatever reasons, and the better and the more that you can communicate and keep that on track, the better and the stronger you guys are going to be in the future. So awesome for you.
Yeah, she's a social worker, so therapy is kind of like an everyday sport for us now.
Yeah, no, I get that. So let's transition, because one thing that's really hard for so many players is, and I've said this before, the NFL Networks did a piece on me 2 years ago, and it kind of had to do with this mountain climbing stuff that I'm doing today. But as I was framing it up, it was really about taking that same energy that we all had, that you and I had playing in the NFL, playing at the highest level of college D1 football, and transitioning that into something that is just as challenging, just as is really going to give you that kind of focus to do something, as your life after football, continues. And after you got out of your college, you started doing some coaching. And tell me more about that. You seem like you had a pretty successful run. You went 42-3, which is amazing. And so I guess the other part of that question is, how come you're still not a college or high school coach today, because you're on such a roll?
Well, people want to say I had a great high school coaching career, but it wasn't me. I coached Ezekiel Elliott in high school, so that made it pretty easy.
Well, you take the credit. Well, yeah, if he wasn't there, then then maybe you're 3-42.
Well,
right?
I tried coaching my son's youth team, and that just wasn't for me. That was tough. Trying to talk in the language that I know with kids who are 7 and 8 years old.
Yeah,
that makes it tough. So I did that 1 year, and then I went into where my daughter was in high school with Ezekiel. I went in there, and I just started out as the quarterback coach, and then the coach retired, and they asked me if I wanted to be the head coach. And you have to go through all those things and apply and meet the AD and meet the head of the school. And it was a little private school, and I actually really enjoyed it. And we did really well. I got a lot of kids. I was at a small school. We only had 28 kids on this team, and I had 2 NFL players come off that team. But we didn't have like the schools I grew up in. We didn't have 28 athletes. We had 28 kids. And my job and what I focused on was getting them all to have heart. I don't care what your athletic ability is, but if you don't want to be here, if you don't want to put it in the work, then we're not going to be very good. And it's up to you to sacrifice, to make to put your nose in there where you don't think it should be, because whether you believe it or not, it's all about heart playing this game. I had a kid, Jack, who was a middle linebacker for us. He weighed about 160 pounds. He was one of the smartest kids you'd ever meet, had a little bit of autism, just was a great kid, first one to practice, last one to leave, just loved coaching him. And, even though I had an amazing athlete like Ezekiel, who was very smart, was very respectful, Foye Oluokun, who plays for the Falcons now, same way. Jack was just one of my favorites, just because he gave it all. He had no business being out there in the same field as some of those guys, but he made tackles. He played hard. He never complained. He was on time. And after our banquet, I found him out in the middle of the football field at 9:00 at night crying.
Mm.
So for me, that made it all worthwhile.
Yeah. And why did you transition out of that?
Well, we moved back. My daughter graduated. That class graduated. She went to Haverford in Philadelphia. And then my wife and I said, okay, we're both from Pittsburgh. If we don't go back now, we're probably going to be in St. Louis for a long time. And we really wanted to be home. We had family there. We're from here. And so we made the choice to go back. And then I ended up coaching at Pittsburgh Central Catholic High School, where my sons went to. Coached there for a few years. They graduated. And I just kind of got out of it. I just didn't want to do it anymore. I wanted to find a new path. And, one thing I really wish I would have done when I did get out of the NFL was go back and continue my education and going to get an MBA or something like that. I went straight into coaching, which felt very normal.
Yeah.
But, I tried to coach in the NFL, never got that. Hey, come on, we want to see how you're going to do with us. You know what I mean? I was At that point, I was 45 years old, or maybe 40 years old, and they didn't want to give me that starting job, even though all my friends were still in the NFL. And I'm reaching out to them and saying, look, I'm here. I want to work. I want to be a coach. And they're like, I think it's just, if you don't go into it right away, then it makes it much, much harder.
Yeah, and it's relationships, and everybody's got their guy, and so they don't have to recreate the wheel. So I totally get that. So now you move out of that, and are you still involved or not with this brain health, which is so important to all of everybody, but in particular to NFL players?
No, I am still involved with RC21X and the Roberto app. I became involved in that because at Central Catholic, my sons played with the CEO of this company, Clarence Carlos, and his son played on the same team. And so I wanted to be a part of it. Clarence is an amazing person. And as a player, and all of our brothers who have played, brain health is certainly important to all of us. And we're all going through it, whether it's a concussion settlement or we all, there's all these different testing that we got to go through. There's everything that we're doing. So this Roberto app came out, and I said, what is this, Clarence? And he said, man, you got to come check it out. So I check it out. I said, I love it. We basically took all the neuropsych tests that you would take, finger tapping, short-term memory tests, all those executive decision-making tests. And we partnered with the Human Performance Center at the University of Texas in Arlington. And we wrote new algorithms, and we made a mobile application. So now everyone can have this test right on their phone. And so that has been great. But the real education for me was learning how to be an entrepreneur. Learning how to be in business, learning how to speak the language. I didn't know how to make a PowerPoint presentation. I had no idea what that was, and then you're building these and you're learning, and how do you command a room when you have to go on and pitch or sell? And to me, it's very competitive. To be a salesman, you have to compete.
Yep.
You have to go find that guy that doesn't want to be in there, and you have to convince him why he needs what you're selling. So it's a lot of fun in that way. But I do believe in the product, and I still have been working with them.
Yeah, that's awesome. So is that your day-to-day?
No. My day-to-day really is my podcast. I do that kind of on the side. Now, I was there for a while day-to-day, but it's across town. It takes me an hour to drive there. So I do that a lot out of home. And we still have the same small little team. And it's still, it hasn't garnered the success that it will someday.
Yeah. But keep grinding. Keep grinding, right?
They're grinding. They're doing a lot of it, and I still make connections and people that I know that I believe could really use this, and I make those connections, and we go there, and the podcasts, and I just try to do a lot of different things. And what's funny, Mark, is I moved back after being gone for so long to Pittsburgh, and I thought it was home, but I realized I didn't have a lot of relationships here, so that was very hard for my wife and I, even though we had some friends. But as you get older and you live in one place, you build a lot of relationships.
Yep.
And so living here, I didn't have a lot of those. I didn't have those people that I could reach out to and say, hey, do you think I could come work with you? I didn't know anybody.
Yeah.
Besides, people I grew up with.
Well, I'm going to end this with where we started and go back to your podcast, Huddle Up with Gus, right? Great podcast, everybody, by the way. I was on it about a month ago and just really enjoyed both Gus and his partner on the show, really getting in depth on a lot of things that I'm doing, and very good interviewers. But, the one thing that's been really surprising for me is the access. I mean, I would have never thought this, and I've said this before, but when I got into it originally, it was from a guy named Yogi Roth, and he is one of the Pac-12 announcers on the West Coast. And so he did a pod on me and my story and everything. And as we're going through it, I had this little voice inside my head thinking, I think I can do this. And it was more just that, nothing more. And what has turned out now after 127 episodes, and I probably recorded another 20 on top of that, so we'll call it 150, is the access to people that I've never thought I've had. For example, you. And now, I'm a receiver, you're a quarterback. If I was living on the East Coast, we'd probably be hanging out together all the time. You're a good dude. Right. And yesterday I did a podcast on Peter Cetera, right? The great frontman for Chicago, right? Went on. I have today's Lee Steinberg, right? The Super H. I mean, all these guys, one after the other, and their story and their adversity. And it's really humbled me in really amazing ways, in that I'm not alone out there. We're all connected in some way. And it's, even though somebody may have a shiny story. Hey, it's Gus. He played 15 years in the NFL. He's still human. You still have the same emotions. You still go through the same junk that everybody else goes through. And that's what is kind of the equalizer in this whole thing.
Right. No, I agree. And, hey, I just want to let you know, my computer just told me it's low on power. I don't know why, but it's been plugged in all day, but maybe. All right. So I think that it is amazing, because I've interviewed people. So I interviewed this kid, his name's DJ Smart, and he grew up in Detroit. He was an athlete till he was 12. And he said, look, my real passion in life is dancing. Now he is one of the world's greatest dancers, and he performs all over the world, dances for Cher and her thing, and just can do like 14 different types of dancing, and is the best at it in the world. And we interviewed him, and he was amazing. And Dave and I just had so much fun talking to him. And it's a guy that I never thought I would interview. I'm thinking, hey, we're going to interview football players, but we've interviewed doctors. We've interviewed people, writers, sportscasters, Peter King from SI, Mike Silver from SI, Leslie Visser, and then I've had people like Coach Dick on, who just, he's grumpy, and that's who you think Mike Dick is, and that's who it was. But we're from Pittsburgh, and so it was like, he was so cool with me. Yeah. And I just never, and you just, it's right. People love it. They want to tell their story. And like you, I want to tell a different story. I want to find out what that influence was for you when you were young, and why sports shaped your life the way it is.
Yeah. Love that.
And so it opens up people to a new way of thinking, but but then you get other things too. Like, how do you deal with Kurt Warner calls yesterday and says, hey, I can come on at 4:00. I'm like, Kurt, it's 2:30. I can't get down to the studio. How am I going to get ready for this? I haven't even, he's like, well, okay, we could do it in December. And it's pretty funny, but people want to come on. They love it. And they love telling their stories.
That's great. So where can people find you?
So you can go to Huddle Up with Gus on any social media. We have a website, huddleupwithgus.com, or, go to the new radio.com app, or everywhere you get your podcast, and type in Huddle Up with Gus. There's really nobody else with that name. There's a few other Huddle Ups, but Huddle Up with Gus is we're on every site now. We're really excited, and it's been a lot of fun. It's been a great journey.
That's awesome. Listen, thoroughly enjoyed having you on the pod, doing a reciprocal one. First you did me, and now I'm doing you. And it was a great thrill to learn more about you and your story. And so keep plugging away, and I'll continue to follow all your guests and listen to you on radio.com.
Yeah, and I'm excited. We're excited for you for your next summit, and we can't wait to start putting it on social when you start that climb.
Well, I want to do a pod from Everest Base Camp, 17,500 feet with you guys, okay?
Yeah, no, that would be amazing. We would love it. And I don't know how it's going to work. We might have to hook a satellite up to the top of your head, but we'll do it.
We're going to make it happen. All right, buddy. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, Mark. Take care.
Okay. Hey, and thank you so much for listening to the Find Your Summit podcast. We are so glad to have you along for this journey. And if you enjoy the show, please tell a friend, share it on iTunes, spread it to the planet. We're looking to
broadcast this to every person that is out there because, as you know, everybody has their own summit that they're going after. Okay, if you're looking to follow my journey, you can find that through my social links on markpattisonnfl.com. That's Mark, M-A-R-K, Pattison, P-A-T-T-I-S-O-N, NFL.com. So, until the next podcast, just remember, clear eyes, full hearts, and remember, it takes a little more to make a champion, so make it happen. Thank you. Bye.